Can everyone hear us in this room by chance?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we sure can.
Okay.
So just in case you guys didn't see the chat, if you can put your names into the chat for roll call, that would be great.
Do we want to wait a little bit for Mike, or what do we want to do?
Yeah, I think they're still trying to get the Sandyham room going. Scott, on the agenda, is Nick first or no?
Yeah, I'm gonna have a forest resources update and committee member stuff at the beginning. So give them a few more minutes to see if they can get the audio fixed there. So there's a group of us down in Canyonville. We're at our steward or forester training. So the other group's up in Salem. They're working on getting their audio taken care of.
Well, this is
Are you able to hear us in the room, folks?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yep, we can hear you.
okay.
Who's ever the host, if you don't want it to record, you can stop recording.
We do want it to record.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I just joined computer audio.
Oh.
You can test the camera with that little guy.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So we should do start. Okay, this is Mike Barnes. I chair the Northwest Regional Forest Practice Committee. Dana, are you on?
Yes, Mike, I am on.
Okay, Dana chairs the Southwest Regional Committee. And Nick is going to quickly do a roll call, first with the Northwest, followed by the Southwest. And when he calls your name, would you please indicate that you can hear him?
Mike Barnes.
Here.
Candace Bonner.
Here.
Kelly Patton.
There.
Randy Silvernagle.
Here.
John Stewart.
See, John. No, he's there.
Here.
Thank you, John. Aaron Weber.
Here.
Jill Bell.
Here.
And Wade Stringham.
Here.
I'll switch over to Southwest. Dana Chose.
Here. I can hear you.
Daniel Fugate. Darren McMichael.
Here.
Chris Arnold.
Here.
Garrett Kleiner.
Here.
Kayla Gosney.
Here.
Eric Cully.
Here.
I think you said here.
Yeah.
Okay. Michael Scott.
Here.
Okay. And Scott Nichols. Let's see. Okay. So we've got quorums for both the Northwest and Southwest Regional Forest Practice Committees, and go ahead with the agenda and any changes or amendments.
Okay, thank you. This is great. There are 4 of us, 2 from the Northwest, 2 from the Southwest that are here in person. Nick is here, and we're grateful that you all joined us. This is amazing that we got almost everyone either in person or on Zoom. We'll try to run through the agenda as quickly as possible. You should have all have received it by email, or so unless there's some other changes. I have one I want to make, and I'll here and Dana, you can do the same. If anyone has changes or something they would like to add to the agenda, now is the time to do that. Any comment? Hearing none, we're going to have a quick update from Jennifer Weichel on the HCP, which is critical to the whole process that we've been undergoing. So she'll do that after Nick speaks on his portion of the agenda. Is there anyone on Zoom, or there's no one in person that has public comment? Now is your time to let us know. Hearing none, there will be no public comment unless someone interrupts us and we have some public comment later in the agenda. So unless there's anything further, Dana, I don't know if you have anything. If you want to say hi and great to be here.
I'm good, Mike.
All right. So we're going to move along with the agenda. First on the agenda, Nick's going to tell us a little bit about what's happening in the update where we are with the division. There's a lot of changes within the staffing positions, and they're not done. So take it away, Nick.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Dana, and members of the committees. It's great to see some folks in person, other folks on the screen, and names of folks on the screen. So also just a little by way of introduction, you can see there's 2 rooms on the screen, and that's because we have folks up in Salem doing the work up here, and we also have training going on with 80 foresters and staff down in Canyonville, Module B. So some of the staff who are putting on that training are also jumping in with the RFPC meetings today to make sure that you all get the most up-to-date information with each of their respective programs and projects that they're working on. And so as we get rolling here, I also want to stop and take a moment to thank everyone who has been serving on the committee for whatever time that's been. I understand very much so over the past 3 years, 4 years with the remote work, with the atypical rulemakings, that it's been a little bit different for the committees, knowing that the committees have played an integral role in forming the rules over the time that the committees have been since the committees were first started, and also helping us as a department get the forest practices guidance in place, and those will continue as we start seeing things settle out in the post private forest accord rulemaking. When I say that, I mean the rulemaking last summer. So really appreciate everybody's time and investment on this committee, and look forward to getting into the work mode again as we get things stabilized a little bit, which Sheriff Barnes had mentioned the staffing. An update on that. We have most of the positions hired for that came out of the private forest accord legislation. Folks just jumping into the conversation. Those were Senate Bills 1501, 1502, and House Bill 4055 last year. And the division, formerly known as the Private Forest Division, is now the Forest Resources Division. And in 2021, there were about 35 people in the division. And today we stand at about 70 to 80 folks who are in the division. So there's a lot of growth that goes with that. And then also with the private forest accord legislation, and then the rules that came out of that as well. There's a lot going on, a lot of new folks in the structure, and those 80 folks in the division, in the Forest Resources Division, that's just part of it. And then we also have a lot of new foresters out in the field, hence the training that's going on. We'll get some updates on the training side of things. We'll also get an update on forest practices technical guidance from and where that stands and what that's all about. Talk a little bit about the Forest Practices Act rule revisions and the cleanup that'll go to the board in June. And then the upcoming rulemakings, the post-disturbance harvest rulemaking. And we'll hear from Jennifer Weichel about the private forest habitat conservation plan. And that'll fill out the morning and hopefully give folks a lot more of the context to kind of where we are right now, with a full understanding that everybody wants training as quickly as possible. And when we laid this out last March, when the bills passed, we're thinking we would do spring training for staff, spring 2023, and that's what we've been doing. And then start doing outreach to the external folks in the late spring or early summer and through the fall to help launch all these rules that go into effect on January 1, 2024. And I'll leave the rest of the training updates to the training folks that will be jumping on a little bit later. So those are a few of the updates, and there's also the legislative work that's happening. That as far as, so that'll keep going on that path, and we may have an update from Nicole Stapp, our legislative contact within our organization, later this afternoon as well. So that's a little bit about the updates. And
so one comment.
Yes.
So in the past, and I haven't seen a staff. So if you could send that out to us, I know it's not complete, but at least where you're at now with who's in what chair and what chairs are empty. Could you send that out to us?
We can do that. And Jacob, are you able to share the Forest Resources Division org chart on the screen there? Or we could send it out and maybe circle back a little bit later.
Do I have permissions or do I have co-hosts?
I can give the Sandy Room co-host. I don't know that the ODF net one has been updated, Nick.
Okay.
So the one I have is the most recent, but I will have to send that out since I'm not able to access that file right now, just because of where we are.
That sounds great. Thanks, Heather. And it's, yeah, the updates are, there's been a lot of hiring going on, and there's also a bunch of changes that have been happening with that, and it's, that org chart is constantly updated. So we'll send out a copy of that. So shifting gears a little bit to the second item on there is the Regional Forest Practices Committee's roles, responsibilities, and touched on it a little bit as far as where we've been over the past few years, and have definitely heard the interest of Operator of the Year program is great. We want to be more involved to help get the forest practices, what I call the forest practice technical guidance, help get that in place, and also be involved in the rulemaking. And the role of the committees as set by statute in 527-650 states that each committee shall consist of 9 members, a majority of whom reside in the region. In addition, the Board of Forestry is also authorized to establish a forest practice committee for each forest region. It further sets the scope of those committees in reviewing rules. And it says that each forest practice committee shall review proposed forest practice rules to assist the State Board of Forestry in developing rules appropriate to the forest conditions within its region. Committee recommendations are advisory only, and the committees need not be consulted prior to the adoption of any forest practice rule. The administrative rules set the focus of review and feedback on the clarity of the rules, technical feasibility of the rules, and practicality of the proposed rules, and provides further details about committee organization and conduct, etc. So again, given the last year or so in the rulemaking, that was a very different way of doing rulemaking compared to what the Administrative Procedure Act says. And what we would see going forward is the committees providing the feedback that I just reviewed. And the first one up would be the post-disturbance harvest rulemaking. And then shortly after that, the tethered logging rulemaking.
Hey, Nick.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that I believe that there's qualifications to be on the committee, which I don't think you read across there, which I think it's stated in the statute, right?
It is stated in the statute, and I can. Members of each committee, this is under ORS 527-650 sub 1, and it says each committee shall consist of 9 members, a majority of whom must reside in the region. Members of each committee shall be qualified by education or experience in natural resource management, and not less than 2/3 of the members of each committee shall be private landowners, private timber owners, or authorized representatives of such landowners or timber owners who regularly engage in operations, to help provide the policy connection to the operational implementation.
Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome. So with that, if I know we got started a little bit late here, but
just one other portion of or more pleasant portion of our duties is also, and we'll be talking about that towards the end of this meeting, is the selection of the Operator of the Year from each region by the Regional Forest Practices Committees. So that's another role that we play. It's a more pleasant role for sure.
And I might add to that, as I mentioned, we have the other room of folks down at the training, Canyonville, and that's Module B, and we've had 120 foresters and staff and some of the folks from ODFW go through Module A to get a base understanding of what are these changes that are coming and with the new rules, and conducted that training in late February, early March, getting the dates right. And then in early May, we had another week with calling Module B. And that was a combination of in the classroom and in the field. And this is the second week of Module B. And Module A was everybody going through the rule training together to get common understanding across the state. And with Module B, again, bringing the folks together. And first week was focused more on the east side and what some of the nuances there are. And then this week is focused on the west side. So that's the training efforts that we've been doing internally. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay.
So now we got started a little bit late here, but Jennifer Weichel, if you want to jump on and
you have it. I know there is at least one vacancy in the Northwest committee, I believe. And I'm not sure if there's a vacancy in the Southwest, but as Nick went through the requirements for an individual to serve on the committee, so I'm certain they would welcome any suggestions on who might be willing to serve and able to serve by the requirements for serving on this committee. So we're looking for someone for Northwest. I don't know.
And then one for there is Southwest as well.
There's a vacancy in each one of the regional forest practices committees, Northwest and Southwest. So let's not let those stand vacant for too long.
Excuse me, I tried finding the terms of everybody. So we should be having people who have come to the term this year, right?
Correct. So there are some folks whose terms expire this year, and the way the process works for filling the vacancies are the area directors will work with the chairs and identify folks who either want to continue serving on the committees or find folks to fill the vacancies and do that outreach. And that process has started with the area directors, and they'll be reaching out to the committee chairs to do that. If any of the committee members have a recommendation of somebody else who would be willing to serve on the committee, please pass that information along to the chair, to your respective chair.
All right.
That's good. Then Jennifer, if you'd be willing to give an overview of the habitat conservation plan here in just a second. Now, habitat conservation plans of being a contract between the state of Oregon and the federal services. So the federal government is the contract administrator of the habitat conservation plan. And that's what some of the changes to the Forest Practices Act rules are the underpinning for a successful habitat conservation plan and the subsequent incidental take permit. So some of the things are changing, yes, and the foundation of where we launch from will be critical to success on the habitat conservation plan. But Jennifer, if you want to take it and go from here, that'd be great.
Yeah, I have a short PowerPoint. I think it looks like I have rights to share. Is that working? Can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. So yeah, this is the first part of this is a review for all of you who were at the RFPC or board meetings late last year. So I'll go through it fairly quick, but just sort of a background of what the HCP is. Nick already covered some of this. So essentially what we're doing with the HCP development is we are taking all of the agreements from the private forest accord that were described in the report and then later codified into statute and rule and translating them into HCP document format. And then along with that is, of course, some additional analysis that has to happen, which I'll talk about in a second, with the ultimate goal to get the incidental take permits in hand for coverage of incidental take for forest activities. So again, this is a review from last year, but just really quick. I've already talked about the statutes and rules in the HCP. The statutes and rules are forming the basis for the conservation measures. So that is what is the uplift to, or the uplift in protection and conservation contribution for the species. And then in the HCP, we'll be doing what's called an effects analysis, which is to describe the benefits and potential impacts to our covered species from the conservation measures. And then, as Nick mentioned, the services, National Marine Fisheries Service, or NOAA, also called NOAA, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, those are the permitting entities. And so really what we're trying to do is write this document to meet their requirements. Nick already mentioned this, ODF, or the Board of Forestry, is going to be the applicant for this HCP, and the services are ultimately the decision makers who decide whether we're going to get incidental take permits or not. So this HCP is a little bit different than others in that the ODF is going to hold the incidental take permits, and it's through the administration of the Forest Practices Act regulations that those regulatory assurances, the take coverage is passed down to essentially the regulated community. And so there's a sort of a pass through for these incidental take permits to the individuals who will be taking the action on the ground through forest management. So some of this might be a little bit different than last time we chatted. The covered landowners for this HCP are all private forest landowners in the state of Oregon. And then the addition is that we've added in the counties and municipalities that own and manage forest land. So they will be covered as well. Tribes also have an option to opt in, but to date, we've not had any confirmation of tribes being interested in opting in. That's still a little bit to be determined, but as of right now, we don't have any tribal lands opting in. The covered activities, so this is the action that will be covered under the HCP. That is essentially going to be all forest management activities regulated under the Forest Practices Act, with the exception of application of pesticides and herbicides. And then also right now, there's discussions of whether or not the post-disturbance salvage logging will be covered or not. And that would be specific to salvage logging in riparian areas. That's still being worked on. Okay, covered species, this is just kind of the abbreviated list. It's a bit expanded from what's in the report though. Essentially, it's all native salmon and trout in the state, and then also 5 species of amphibians, which I'll go over in a second. And then starting here at the bottom here, mountain whitefish, Pacific Euchelon, and green sturgeon are 3 non-salmon and trout species that are covered. And then we have 5 species of stream-associated amphibians that are also covered. Okay, so really quick, I know this probably shows up small on your screen, and we can get Heather to send this out as an attachment after. But this is our timeline for the rest of the project through the end. And you don't really need to read it. I just want to point out a couple of key things here. I don't know if folks can see my mouse cursor, but essentially, we're here in 2023. What we're working on right now is revision to the HCP content that was initially submitted to the board last December, with the goal of having this next draft done towards the middle to end of 2024 to kick off the NEPA process sometime late 2024. We're currently targeting the end of 2024 for submitting the document to the services along with the notice of intent. And then the other important thing to note here on this long-term timeline is that we've got the project moving along at a rapid pace with the goal of having incidental take permits in hand by Q1 2027. So we're giving ourselves quite a bit of wiggle room there, just in case things go awry. As you know, we have to have the incidental take permits in hand by the end of 2027, or else the rules all roll back to the current PFA rules. I'll just spare the details on this one. This is just a list of the chapters that we're working through revisions. Another thing is we've been very active in working with the authors on our HCP content review. We're meeting with a subset of the group weekly or almost weekly, and working through chapter reviews and edits. And so essentially we've got this new system where, ICF as our contractor writes the content. The new thing is it's coming to ODF first, and we're giving an initial pretty thorough review. We want to make sure it's in good shape before it goes out to the author group, which is our small subset of authors that meets weekly. And then through this small group review, it eventually comes back to our larger steering committee for review, which includes the services as well as our state agency partners. And so we're working through that process. It seems like it's working pretty well. We have a steering committee meeting today, actually. And then this is the last of the chart, and this one you definitely need a handout, but again, you don't really need to know the details. Each of these rows represents a chapter that we're working through the revisions. And again, we're slated to have this whole thing done. This would be the end of the HCP development, this last black box, towards the middle of 2024. And so what that would mean, it's still going to be a draft, but it would be a complete draft that would already be have multiple rounds of review by multiple groups by the time we get that far. So that's all I have. I can quit sharing and take questions if there's this time.
Jennifer, I have just one basic one. Can species be added under this HCP?
That's a good question. I would say that, well, definitely they can't be added later without an amendment. We're trying to keep this document very true to what's in the Private Forest Accord report. And so if it's not something that's listed in the Accord report and someone wanted it added, I think we really want to have a thorough conversation with all of the author groups and get buy-in on that. So the short answer is maybe, but not without some serious thought, because anything we add is going to be out of alignment with the PFA report.
I've got one question.
Yeah.
To piggyback on Mike's. Wouldn't it be a good idea now to think of putting in some sort of, maybe you don't put it in the document yet, but having a way if somebody does come with the species and the type of review that would have to happen, then leaving it to go, because I'm pretty sure that there will be others that want things in there, and it'd be nice for you to be prepared.
I hear you, and I think there is a process in place even after the HCP is complete for doing that, and that would be an amendment process. It's complicated because you do have to redo an effects analysis and then also, open it back up for NEPA and public comment. And right now, we've got the goalposts in mind and are working at a really rapid pace. So to add a species late in the process would significantly set back our timeline to meet that 2027 deadline. So I guess what I'm saying is that if there's serious interest in adding a species, that conversation needs to be happening now with the author groups.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Okay.
Yeah. And even then, I think we're running against a hard wall here where we're not going to be able to make too many big changes like that. But
any other questions or comments for Jennifer as they work through this very simple process?
Are you going to email us the slides that you showed so that we can look at them more easily,
Yes.
especially the detailed ones?
Yes. Yeah, I will, I'll make a PDF of that and send it to Heather to send to you. Sorry, it didn't get sent out ahead of time. I was added on last minute first thing this morning, so.
Well, thank you very much. And I was going to say, in terms of new species, if climate change progresses, there may be legitimately, especially with amphibians, new species that are becoming endangered. And I don't know what the rules say about whether all endangered species have to be covered and considered.
Yeah, honestly, the decision on what species to cover is up to the applicant. They don't all have to be endangered. We have some on our, well, actually all the amphibian species we have are currently not listed. They're not TNE listed.
So is there anyone who has not seen the draft of the HCP? If so, then make it known and we'll direct you to how to see it. Because it is out, it is there.
It's where?
You have
it. So we can make the link, share the link out as well, Jennifer. It would be the information that went to the Board of Forestry, and probably the most relevant one. And this is again one of those processes that private forest accord legislation is directing how this is developed. So the wiggle room, so to speak, for the department is we'd follow what the PFA report and intent there is, and work closely with the authors on this. So that's the guideposts here. Not to say that other ideas aren't good or valid, just that that's the direction that we have and the bounds that we can work within. So thank you, Jennifer. And also Jennifer jumped right in with the habitat conservation plan, stepping away from her normal wildlife biologist duties. And we've had a lot of staff doing that kind of work as we've gotten everything up and running. And new staff that have jumped in full force, getting up to speed as quickly as possible, and really appreciate all the work that's being done on all those different fronts, because we've got a lot of pieces moving as we're getting this up, all these pieces put together and meeting the deadlines that are the legislature set. So we'll keep doing that. Okay. In that spirit, I think, Scott, are you in the room down south there, ready to go with the forest practices technical guidance? Is he on? I don't see him. I can't see him.
All right, there we go. Yeah, we're here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead then. Good morning, Chair Barnes, Chair Jost, and all the other members and folks out in the various places around, I think, the state of Oregon. Maybe you're farther out than that too. So thanks for joining. I'm going to be going over our forest practice technical guidance process and some updates on that. So with the development of the new forest practices rules, going through the rulemaking, there are some requirements in there that we develop forest practices technical guidance, and we've actually made a definition of that, of what that is. And those that have been around for a while, and currently we have what we call forest practices technical notes. These are just a upgrade on those. Some of those pieces are being upgraded into the forest practices technical guidance framework. Some of these are new concepts coming out of the new rule. So I was going to go over a little bit on the update, where we are with that, what they are, and where we're going with those. So as I mentioned, they are required in different pieces of the rules. And also as we developed what the definition of these are, they're a stakeholder process to help us develop. We have new rules out, and the forest practices technical guidance will help operators, landowners, and folks out there understand what those rules are and how to implement those. So that's kind of what the technical guidance is. And I mentioned stakeholder process to develop those, and we have in the past when we do the tech notes and stuff like that, we usually form a group together of stakeholders and internal folks and other agencies to do that. So the ones that we're going through now, because of the timelines and they're so closely associated with what came out of the Private Forest Accord and the new rules, we're using the authors group as our stakeholder process. So as we draft the forest practices technical guidance, we're sending it through the PFA authors network, and those are going out to several folks. I know several folks that are online here have reviewed those and provided comments back. So we've sent out drafts for a few of those already. The steep slopes, identifying slope retention areas, the equipment limitation zone retention, and the RELZ stuff. We've sent those out through that process. Both of those we got quite a few edits and suggestions and comments back from the groups, the author groups that we sent to. So we've formatted those, incorporated all those comments and edits and all that, and you should have received those, all the committee members. I think those were sent out yesterday. So we have the two that are in final, as I mentioned, the identifying slope retention areas, and then the ELZs, equipment limitation zones, and the RELZs. So you have those. You can look through those. If you have any comments, like I said, they're pretty much in the final draft stage. You can send any other comments directly to me on that if you have anything. We're gonna try to make those, finalize those, and get those posted to our external website fairly soon. Jill, end up.
Yeah, I guess I have a few questions around this process. So am I gathering what I heard you just say, that the technical guidance is final at this point?
We have those two pieces, the ones that were sent out are, they're pretty much in the final draft stage.
Okay. Will the authors get another shot at looking at the document and revising and reviewing, or what's the next step here? Is it just considered final and done?
So yeah, the authors made their edits, we incorporated those, and we adjusted anything we needed to do, and then we were making those final.
Okay. So this is final. So was there a specific deadline then on having this done?
So we were kind of in a crunch. We don't have any specific deadlines, but we wanted to get this steep slopes. That was our highest priority, to get that out. And as will be mentioned later on, we have training coming up on that. So we wanted to get that piece done ahead of our training.
Okay. And I guess just a little bit more for my understanding and clarification here. I'm sorry if this is a little redundant. Did I gather that this is supposed to be considered a living document then?
Yeah, as all our other like our tech notes and stuff, yeah, they're pretty much, as things change, we have the ability to go in there and change those. So yeah, more or less a living document as we progress, as we need to add things or change things in those.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, all right, any other questions before I move along there? Okay, not seeing any. All right, so I mentioned we got those out. Next up will be, we're working on, we have a draft for the avoiding roads in critical locations. We'll be getting that out to the authors group for review here fairly shortly. And then probably by the end of the month, 1st of June, we'll have the forest road inventory assessment technical guidance ready for review to those groups. We're looking at probably about a 2-week, 1 to 2 week turnaround on reviews, and then we'll take those edits and finalize those. And as we finalize, we'll get folks notified and get those posted too. And then also kind of in the next several weeks, we will have the perennial flow survey protocol technical guidance out that we're working with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife on. So those are kind of the next group that will be coming out. Some others we have quite a few that were actually added into rural that we need to develop. Some of these are combined, but we had 2 for harvesting. We had like 9 pieces of technical guidance. Some will be combined for just the road section and some water classification stuff. There's 2 or 3 there. But next up, we have the identifying channel migration zones, water classification and flow calculations, stuff on updating. We used to have a tech note 4. We have a tech note 4 right now, but updating that for fish stream crossings, and then we'll have another tech note for non-fish stream crossings, since the rules are since the new rules address those a little bit more. Weather road use, we're going to update that. We'll have something out on vacating forest roads that may tie into that FRIA piece. So we have a lot of work still ahead of us. We've had a lot of work done. I want to commend my staff and others that have jumped up. We went straight from rulemaking into the forest practices, technical guidance, getting reviews and stuff. And as Nick mentioned, a lot of us are down here in Canyonville helping out with the training. So that's kind of the update there. Wanted to give a quick update on some of our staff within the unit.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So the forest road inventory guidance, there's a difference between industrial and family forest in the forest roads inventory. Is that difference being covered under this guidance?
No, so this is just a forest resource inventory and assessment, the FRIA piece in the guidance. So the small forest, there wasn't a requirement to have technical guidance as such for the road condition assessment for the small forest landowners. So we have that within the small forest landowner office. They're developing some guidance for folks on that. We have Josh Hansen's been working, and they've been working with my team also on developing that. But that's going to be a separate document or a separate guidance for that.
Okay, that's pretty critical to us in the family forest world, since it's there, but we don't know what kind of guidance is being given to the stewardship foresters in identifying what needs to be in that less than FRIA inventory.
Yeah, and that's currently being developed. I don't know, Jesse, if you have any more input on that.
No real other input. I think Scott pretty much covered it. Yeah, Josh Hansen is currently working on getting that guidance set up and put together. And as he is finalizing what that RCA, that road condition assessment, will look like, then we'll make sure to get that guidance updated as well.
So who will that guidance be sent to for review?
He currently is working on setting up there's a fish passage task force, as well as a sort of committee that he is working on putting together right now to review SFISH as a whole, which is the Small Forest Land Investment and Stream Habitat Grant Program, in combination with the RCAs. And so we're hopeful that with a combination of our stewardship foresters and SFO foresters reviewing what those RCAs look like and how they will be implementing them on the ground, we're also hopeful that those committees will review them as well to make sure that all around small forest landowners in Oregon are able to complete an RCA easily and effectively.
So who's the person in charge of that?
Josh Hansen, he's our SFISH coordinator.
What I might add here is Mike Kroon, who's responsible for Secretary of the Committee on Family Forest Landowners, would likely take some of these topics to them, the things dealing specifically with the small forest landowner, parts of the rules and the small forest landowner office pieces that Jesse's talking about, and have those go before the Committee on Family Forest Landowners. Okay.
On both sides, eastern and, okay.
Yeah, Committee on Family Forest Landowners has representation from the east side and from the west side.
Yeah, for those small landowners, you can't miss out on getting their input on it.
And the Oregon Small Woodlands Association is also part of the author group.
Okay.
Looking at these topics as well.
Right, any other questions on that piece there? All right, go ahead, Jill.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to revisit this once again, just looking at a few notes here back to the steep slopes guidance, not technical guidance, not tech note. So is this going to be revisited again once version 3 is ready?
Version 3 regarding
the map.
Oh, so yeah, I'm not really totally in the loop of everything that's. Oh,
Scott, maybe I can jump in here on this one. So as some folks are aware, there's the map that's out is different than what was anticipated, and I'm working through with the author groups to find a solution on that, which may impact what this guidance looks like. At this point, we're expecting this as the guidance, and that we get to some resolution to the map question.
Okay, thank you.
So the current guidance is, it's been developed since, as we finished up the rulemaking. So we're going on based on what we anticipated. So yeah, if there's any changes in anything, any changes to maps or anything, yeah, we will revisit the guidance and update that in preparation for training and that sort of thing.
I might add there's the steep slopes certification is a requirement under the rules that go into effect January 1st, 2024. And there will be training in mid-June for the steep slopes certification. So that's part of the technical guidance, working on getting that done, and the maps to the right spot.
So kind of the topic of the steep slopes, the guidance, the technical guidance and training, all that, we did get we had an open position for a geotechnical specialist on staff in Salem. We were able to fill that position. The person will be starting June 5th, so we're happy to have that. So she'll be able to be a main contact for the steep slope stuff there on the policy side of things. So looking forward to that. Some other staff, we able to hire another field coordinator, Forest Practice Act field coordinator position to help our folks out in the field on all these different pieces that we've added with the new rules and the new technical guidance. Tim Moss is the person that filled that position. He's been on for over a month now. And then as Nick mentioned earlier with Jennifer Weigel focusing on the HCP, we have an interim wildlife biologist, Shannon Vandeventer. Several folks probably know her. She's a stewardship forester out of the Roseburg unit. She has a background in biology, so she's offered to step up and fill in some of those roles that Jennifer has done and needs done as she moves focusing on the HCP. I think that's all I have, unless there's any more questions. Hopefully, as we progress the next few months, that these technical guidance pieces get done, completed, shared. We will be posting those on our external website and be replacing some of the current tech notes that we have there as they come along. So,
Scott, I do have a question. They're kind of tacking on to what Jill was saying. I guess I can't really wrap my head around how the guidance would be produced for the steep slopes if everybody knows that they're actively working on the model and the model's not complete. Why would you continue down the road if things are being verified and you know that?
So actually, you know, the current technical guidance we've pretty much completed before we had the final slopes model come out. So you know, that's what we have. That's what we know right now. So that's you know, what we're planning for. But as things change, we'll change along with it on that.
Okay, but you also say the final slopes model, but everybody knows that it's totally different than what was negotiated on, right? I mean, it was blobs before, and it doesn't look anything like that. So I guess my issue is calling it final.
Dana might jump in. So what we've heard from folks through the whole process is, in fact, on March 6th, maybe at a follow-up meeting, March 6th, 2022, 2 days after the rules or the legislation was passed, is when is the training coming? So we were trying to get ahead of the training, and I got the technical guidance that Scott's team pulled that together for the slopes with the idea that the model was going to turn out what everybody thought the model was going to turn out. So yes, as Scott said, this one has to match what the final model is. We thought that we had the final model, but we'll adjust it to make sure that it makes sense and fits with the model and makes sense for implementation too. But that's how we got there ahead of the model, is trying to make sure that we could have all this done. And we know that operationally, everybody wants the information as quickly as possible so they can start their planning 9 months ago.
One question, and excuse my ignorance on the schedule of HCP and everything, but how much does it hurt everything if the implementation of the rules were put off a year so small forest owners especially could grasp a lot of, it's a lot for people to grasp. Does it completely throw the schedule off if it was?
The rules are set to go January 1st, and that's the deadline that the legislature gave us. So that's what we're working toward, and everybody's running hard. Our staff is running hard to make sure that happens to meet what was negotiated in the PFA discussions. We, as an agency, we don't get to set the deadlines, but we get to execute what the legislature gives us, and that's what we're doing our best to make that happen.
Yeah, just thinking from the small landowner perspective, especially, then
sure,
a lot to take in.
Well, and then the response, I mean, I'm not, the ships left the port and everything, but when you're dealing with small landowners, it's very hard to really get the pulse and understanding of everybody. And yes, there's organizations that do it. But it's still, there's a lot of people out there that really don't get it. And I don't know what the small landowners should do. I don't know if they should talk to someone to kind of get it to make sure they're not thrown into something that they shouldn't be, and that they understand. Because if they don't understand, they're not going to want to follow it. They're going to do, I mean, they don't want to be hauled off to jail, but they're not the same. They're not the same as industrial landowners. And I think this rulemaking and the process doesn't really address them. So that's my thing. And like I said, I've talked to some small landowners, and it's a shame that we can't do this better. But hey, it's okay.
So I would go back to Jill's comment when she asked the question. Is this guidance a living document or a dead deal when it's finalized? Is there room for movement after January 1st, 24?
So I think so. I mean, as long as we're in line with what the rules are, if, you know, if some of the things are changed, if, you know, for example, if the steep slopes model is changed, or that's updated or whatever, yeah, we can move things around, or if we didn't get something quite right. I think the technical guidance, that's an internal document to ODF, so we have that opportunity to, you know, change things as needed, or if we need to add some pieces of clarity, or if something comes up, they are, and just like our in the past, our tech notes, we look at them every so often to make sure they're still in line with what the rules say and what is needed to implement the rules.
Okay, any further questions for Scott or comments? Thanks, and a lot of hard work in front of you.
I have one last question, if I could get one last question in. Is Ferns getting updated in regards to these rule changes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is Ferns on track to be updated in time?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's it.
Thanks for the questions. I appreciate that, Jill, that you know, all the questions you have. Thanks.
Okay. Oh, we have reached our break time. We're going to take a quick one here in the group, and all of you that are at home or at the office or whatever, you can do what you want for the next 10 minutes or so, and then we'll go into a session on the rule revisions. And Nicole, is she up there on? I can't see them. She's not there. She will be. She'll be there. She will be there at her appointed time of 10:15. So we have 10 minutes before then. Go ahead.
Are those of us in this room able to do what we want to do?
You want to hit
just email me and I'll have your contact. All right, is everyone back with us? Dana, are you there?
I'm here, Mike.
Okay, so we're assuming the two chairs are present, so we'll go ahead. And anyone else that's still coming will. So I see a couple of new people that have joined us. I see Seth is on there. He's a stranger to me, but we share a common name. Anyway, we're going to move ahead with the schedule. Next up is Nicole. Did we find her? Oh, there's she's here. She's definitely here.
This is good. Good job. That hurt him.
So we're going to go ahead with the topic, forest practices, rule revisions, and take it away as best you can. Do you have a screen share?
I do, and I think Caleb is, or Jacob.
Like you roll the slides with just the down arrow on the.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Staff. I joined ODF back in March, so not a long time ago, but it feels like quite a while ago. And I work with the Forest Resources Division as a policy lead, so I get to do a combination of rules and policy work and legislative work, and then I'm sure after this big bunch of work that we're going to talk about right now, I'll probably do some project-oriented type work as well. So I was asked to share with you all a few of the highlights of some rules that we're working on updating. So I'm guessing that you're all at least a little bit familiar with the large rule package that was approved by the board back in October. And so based on the passage of Senate Bill 1501, Senate Bill 1502, which required really the incorporation of the private forest report into our rules, which really prompted really substantial changes or rule revisions. So Don laid the.
Can everyone hear her that's on the Zoom meeting? Hearing no problems, then keep going.
So that was a rather large rule package. It was about 150 pages long, and it contained rules with different effective dates. So some of those rules were effective in November of 2022. Others will be effective July 1 of 2023. So that's just around the corner. And the other set of it will be effective on January 1st of 2024. One of the things that Senate Bill 1501 did was, in recognition of how quickly we were making really substantial rule changes, there was an opportunity to go back before July 1 and make any kind of housekeeping, technical corrections, conforming amendments that might be needed. And that's currently the process that we're in right now. And so we have prepared some rules that we're proposing to the Board of Forestry at their June 7th meeting for them to adopt. So this presentation will just go over the highlights of the things that are actually maybe a larger change or more substantial. In addition to the ones I'm sharing with you right now, there are a large handful of kind of technical corrections, spelling, grammar, typos, rule reference updates, or just some language changes that were really for clarity, but they don't have an impact. So all of those I'm not really highlighting in this presentation, but in preparation for the board meeting, I think as early as tomorrow, that board packet is supposed to post on our website. And within those materials, you can find a summary document. We'll talk about each of the more substantial changes and the reason why they're being requested. And then there will also be a detailed track changes document if you're more interested in seeing the specific language changes occurring. So the first one within Division 600, which are our definitions, those were originally slated in the first rule package from October. For all those updates and changes to happen January 1st of 2024. But we discovered there's a handful of definitions that really are needed for those July 1 rules. And so those definitions that are on the board, common ownership, Eastern Oregon, small forest land owner, and Western Oregon. We did not modify those definitions. We're just having them effective in July rather than January. There was a small technical correction to the type SSBT stream. So called out smaller medium streams, and really that definition applies regardless of size of the stream. The biological goals and objectives definition is also being modified. The way it was written is it referred to an approved habitat plan. And of course, we need biological goals and objectives to mean something even before that plan's approved. So very small correction there. We also discovered there was a small technical error with the error with the dry channel area definition. And then it turned out we actually didn't use that word as we had defined it. So we're just going to delete it in its entirety, which will not have an impact on the rules. And then a more substantial change, which we'll talk about in more detail towards the end of the presentation, is that we established a significantly disproportionately impacted definition for small forest landowner parcels. And I will say throughout this whole presentation, that is really one of the largest changes happening in this rule package. Within Division 603, Adaptive Management Program, one change is that for the Adaptive Management Program Committee and Independent Research Science Team, there was due dates prescribed for August 1st, and we're moving them to January 31st, so roughly a 6-month extension. The items that changes the due date for are their charters, and for AMC, their initial list of research items, research topics with priority rankings within them. And then for IRST, it was also the best science available. They're going to need more time in order to be able to produce quality items. So we're asking the board for that 6-month time change. The other change is that the AMC rules, as they were adopted, say that, and then I say the word wrong every time, an interim member can be appointed, and then every 90 days they need to re-notify the committee staff person that that person is still serving or not. We've taken out that 90-day period because it seems a little redundant, and said that the interim member cannot serve for more than a year. So this will better align with kind of the logistics of how that appointment process works. Within Division 605, it was discovered that we had written into the rule that written plans could be waived for cable yarding across a specific type of stream for designated debris flows or designated source, sediment source areas. And then it actually later in the rules said that those were not waivable. So we went back to the private forest accord report to see what was the intent, and it turns out the intent was that that would not be waivable. So technical correction that we're making to kind of clear contradiction that was unintentionally created. Division 607, which is small forest landowner section. So this is a portion of the rules that will come into effect January 1, 2024. It establishes 2 new alternatives for significantly disproportionately impacted small forest landowners. So this would be in addition to the existing small forest landowner minimum options that are in this. It also then needed to specify how small forest landowners were supposed to notify if they were intending to use those options. Another change is that previously the rules were written to say that the 50-year conservation timeline for the credit happened at the time of the notice of the operation. It'll be adjusted to say at the time of certification of the tax credit. So a slight change of when that timeline starts. And then the last item off that is establishing a timeline for small forest landowners to express disagreement or request an appeal. Previously, nothing was on there. So we provided a 90-day window of if you disagree with the decision made, you have 90 days to notify the state forester. So those are the rule changes. And maybe I'll go over the significantly disproportionately impacted, and then we'll open it for questions. So this language really in the rules that were already adopted back in October, there was a placeholder language under the purposes of the small forest landowner rules that basically said, we have more work to do. This is a conversation that wasn't wrapped up and wasn't decided. And so we have now removed that placeholder language and instead replaced it with the language that's been agreed to. And so the intent is that for some small forest landowners, the impact that they're going to experience is even more so than other small forest landowners, which is kind of the essence or intent behind the disproportionately impacted. And this language really is driven by what the report authors kind of agreed to together. So it's basically a 3-part definition, and I'll stop talking so you can read it. One thing I will share, this is expected to be a pretty rare situation. We don't think that it will be very common, and from some map exercises that we're actually ranking, it is not very frequently that parcels actually meet the 20% encumbrance for most streams. So really don't expect a large number of small porcelain owners to qualify for this, but this are three of the four criteria that the authors work together on in agreeing to what should be considered a significantly proportionally impacted parcel. And then those two new alternatives that will exist for those that are significantly disproportionately impacted will be one, it'll exempt the small porcelain owner from the watershed cap that's described in our rules. And will also allow small porcelain owners to count all trees retained in the riparian management area towards the wildlife leaf criteria. One thing that will happen as a result of this session, so House Bill 2161B is a bill that's currently being considered by the legislature. And what that would do is it would actually increase the forest conservation tax credit value for those that meet the criteria you just saw on the screen ahead of time, the three base items to meet the significantly disproportionately impacted definition. And then if they also have averaged their annual adjusted gross income has averaged less than 125% of Oregon's median income, then they'll be eligible to actually receive 125% of the tax credit value. So essentially, it increases their tax credit value by 25% to offset the impacts that they might be experiencing due to the. And again, that bill has not passed yet. It is very close to the finish line. So it actually, in the House Revenue Committee, the Joint Tax Expenditure Committee, and on the House floor, passed unanimously, which is not very often we see that happen. And so it's currently waiting for a vote on the Senate floor before it's actually, of course, real, and then the governor will need to sign it. But that is, yeah, that's what I had planned today. Are there questions about any of the rule changes that were presented or about the process?
Yeah, I have a question about the yarding. You'd said in there that it's not waivable to yard across non-perennials in the channel, and I know I'm kind of going back to the same thing again there with the steep slopes portion of it, but the steep slopes has drastically changed. It's went from blobs to stripes, and by doing that, so that there is no option to waive that, you are in fact causing there will be more roads required to make it if you can't yard across them, and they switch to stripes. So I guess I'd ask Nick, has that been brought up with the negotiation group? Because that's a big deal.
The negotiation group is well aware of the impacts that the new map would have on the landscape, and they're working to address those issues. So it is a big deal, yes. Since I have the mic, I might offer one other thing as was noted for helping people understand what are the rules today, what are the rules in a little over 30 days, what are the rules in a little over 6-7 months, and to help and then for planning purposes after January 1st, and trying to get our heads around what does all this mean. The department plans to have what I'll call the colorful rules, because it'll have a set of rules on the external website that will show the rules that are the historic July 1, 2023 rules, and that'll just be in black color, and then have another color for the post July 1, 2023 rules, and then the rules that go into effect after January 1, 2024. So you can look at the rules and have all those comparisons there, and then also have clean versions of each of those rule sets for planning purposes to know, okay, what am I looking at as I'm planning for operations after January 1st, 2024. So those should be available shortly after the board makes their decision on adopting changes or not. So probably mid to late June, and then also have the print version the newspaper version that folks are familiar with, of the January 1, 2024 rules available probably mid-July to mid-August, sometime in there. So get those ready as quickly as possible.
So
we've got one question in the room, and then I see Jill has a question.
Well, I could go before Jill because she could finish me off. No, because it's the same thing. So it concerns me that the map that is going to be the final map wasn't the map beforehand. And you're specifically talking about written plans, how changing of everything. It seems to me that that's getting the cart before the horse, and who says somebody's going to follow through and say, oh yeah, that is a problem, so you could do it this way. So you could talk to Jill. I don't know how you say this is the rule and then you bring in a map that has something different, and having the ability to try to operate within those constraints.
Jill, did you want to finish us off?
Sure. And well, I see Dana also. I guess my question is going to circulate back to ferns. I heard already when I asked about ferns for the steep slopes, you guys said ferns is on track for being updated. Is it ready for the upcoming July 1 rule changes? Can anybody clarify for me there if it's updated, if it's ready, and how the landowners are being integrated into the fern system and what's being communicated out?
So 2 parts. First, ferns will have I don't know where it's sitting right now, this moment process-wise, but it will have the stream layer in there ready for July 1st. And there's the public affairs team as well as technical staff are working on communication that'll go out to everybody who has an email in fern system right now, and then likely postcards to small forest landowners and other folks who don't have landowners who could be impacted related to streams who don't have an email address in ferns. So that communication is being worked on right now as well. And Go ahead.
Okay, I just sitting here thinking that rule changes on July 1st. We've got the 15-day waiting period. So potentially June 15th is when we're going to need to make sure everything's updated and ready to go in ferns. Is that, I mean, that's just a couple weeks out. Is that what I'm hearing, that it is ready for essentially June 15th at that point?
Yes, and I might also, so the July 1, 2023 rules go into effect for notifications that happen on July 1, 2023 or after, context-wise.
Okay. Okay, and are you guys feeling fairly confident in the ferns updates? It sounds like maybe in the past updates haven't always been overly smooth. Are you guys feeling pretty good about the one that's ahead of us here for this iteration and again at the beginning of 24?
I think we'll meet the statutory requirements by December 30. We'll meet the statutory requirements by December 31, 2023. And thanks for the highlight there, Jill. Yes, every time we've done a ferns update, we've been given some deadlines that are pretty difficult to meet, but we've managed to step up to the plate and get it done and make sure that we've got a plan in place for after the statutory deadline to refine the system and make it as user-friendly as possible.
Alrighty.
So we'll continue on that path. And we will also be working with both stewardship foresters, small forest landowner foresters, so folks within the department and folks outside the department to help make sure that we have the right functionality there and still meeting the statutory requirements.
Okay. Is there anything that the landowners can do to be more involved with these updates?
We have a project manager on point with it, and we'll have him reaching out to folks to have those inputs into the process and build that out for instance, for user testing and user experience to help get that nailed down. So yes, we'll be doing outreach, and some of the folks on the call are familiar with that from the last go around, and we'll likely be in touch with those folks again.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Dana?
Okay, my question has to do with implementation, and it's basically the same question that I asked in our Southwest meeting there in November, which is, with the rules going into effect, if you cut trees legally in a buffer in a properly notified unit prior to December 31st, can you yard them after December 31st? And I think it was kind of, I know you and I had a little bit of email correspondence on it. It doesn't make logical sense to me of why you couldn't do that as long as it's kept in a reasonable fashion. I'm going to say that's so that the wood isn't left there long enough to degrade or something like that. But I was wondering, what is your position on that currently, Nick?
So the rules don't allow for continuations of operations, and also the rules effective January 1, 2024 don't allow for harvesting within the stream buffer, so the timber needs to be removed before December 31st, 2023. That's what the statute says.
So if you cut it, you can't yard it, which means you can't plant it, you can't do forest management, you can't improve it later. It doesn't make sense, Nick.
The operations need to be completed along those streams by December 31, 2023. And that's a policy decision that was made outside of this context.
Right. Some of the negotiators that I've talked to said that that's not in the spirit of the negotiations either. So, but I'm sure you
Fair
know.
enough.
Is there a way to tell if there's any questions in the chat, or are we just pretty safe that there's not?
Could a plan for an alternate practice work for that circumstance, Nick?
It's not within the statute required.
Could you repeat that? I didn't quite hear that.
Is that not within the bounds of what the statutes and the rules require?
If a plan for an alternate practice could work in that circumstance. And he says no.
Okay.
And then Nick has also asked me to share some of the maybe highlights or notable bills this session so far. And so we are still, of course, in the 2023 legislative session, and it will end, or is supposed to end, June 25th is the constitutional signing day. So till then, we're kind of waiting to see what happens. At this point in the session, most of the bills that are still, alive and moving through the process or are in the Joint Ways and Means Committee, which is a budget committee, and it just takes forever to find out what they're actually going to fund or not. So all the bills I'm going to mention right now are really waiting for their final whether or not they move or not based on money, really. But some notable ones for us are House Bill 3016. So this is the green infrastructure bill. So it's actually, most of it is actually for Department of Land and Consumer. That one, DLCD. I think of all its acronym right now, but there is a small portion in there that would go to ourselves, and what it would do is actually create under their kind of the scope of urban and community forestry. It would create a tool canopy assessment tool. It would be available to all local and government entities for them to use for planning purposes. So if the bill made it, that would be a component for us to implement. There's also Senate Bill 872. This bill has us endeavor to do additional activities in partnership with federal services underneath the Good Neighbor Authority. And so many of these projects are things we're actually already able to do, but encourage us to try to do some of those activities at an increased level than what we're currently doing. That bill is actually just waiting for its final vote on the Senate floor. There's also Senate Bill 753. This is a bill around sudden oak death, and it would provide about $3.1 million of an appropriation for those treatments. And then a bill that we, of course, watch every session very eagerly. This year it's House Bill 2087, and this is a harvest tax bill. And then the agency budget, of course, remains a mystery until they start working on it, but we are still waiting for that. And I've been told that traditionally ours is one of the last budgets to go through because it does have the tax components. Things have been a little slow because again, it's the budget committee, and there was thought that after the May 17th revenue forecast that came out, we'd start to see some movement, but there's also been delays on the Senate side of getting bills worked. So we're kind of in a holding pattern, but I would say those are probably the more notable bills for us this session. That's all I have.
Thanks.
Your pretty face.
Random question, if you cut the timber, but in a yard prior to December 31st, would you still be expected to reforest that area? Timber still on the ground. If you were, could you then file the plan for alternate practice under a safety concern for the tree line? I don't know why it's the first thing that popped into my head, but
it was creative.
Yeah,
I could go for that. I can see how you could.
So get these trees out. So this is one of the things that maybe an unintended consequence of deadlines that were set in this, in the statute and the laws. And is it something that we want to that everybody's content with? Not necessarily. Operationally speaking, is it make it easy? No. Is it different than what we've done historically and having continuations from one year to the next? No. It's also 50 years from the start of the Forest Practices Act, a huge change, and a lot of folks expecting that January 1 we have a different start and having a clean break, and whatever that day is isn't whatever that clean break day isn't make it easy operationally, unfortunately, but that's where we find ourselves.
in general, you think you'd still be required to reforest it if some trees were? Yeah, for me, I'm not going to probably run into this. I don't operate a whole lot compared to most, but if there was a no crap situation where I do run into that, would I still be expected to reforest that area?
I'd have to consult the folks that are on the ground and see what I'd have to look at the rules more closely than something I can give you.
It's just one of those what ifs.
Right.
Also point out that it's a deviation from common practice on every other rule change that's happened, clear back to clear cut limitations and everything else. This is changing of practice.
That was the idea.
Okay, well, we're gonna move along since we want to keep on schedule to the extent possible. So the next topic, Jennifer Ward and Jesse Ebert, are they there?
We're here. Yep, we're here in the hospitality suite.
Oh, fantastic. I'm going to join you.
It's not as luxurious as it sounds, but it is a nice space to meet with you today. So
right.
Chair.
Go ahead with your topic.
So good morning, Chair Barnes and Chair Chose and members of the committee. I'm Jennifer Ward. I'm currently working on a limited duration position as a training coordinator for the Forest Resources Division. That is up at June 30th, and I came on board to help the new training staff develop a 2-year training program and implement these trainings. So the training staff prior to February consisted of not a half-time employee, but half-time of 1 full-time employee's duties. And it's increased now in capacity to 4 people. 2 people are training specialists, so they have background in adult education and content creation. And then I'm on board as a subject matter expert with my experience as a stewardship forester. And then Paul Clements, who's been doing the training for quite some time now, over 10 years, is still on staff as well. So as Nick mentioned, we are currently in Canyonville doing a 1-week training program. So this will be the conclusion of our week-long training for stewardship foresters and supervisors. We started that off in late February and into March, offering the training to anybody and all internal staff that wanted to attend. And the second session, we focused just on stewardship foresters and supervisors, and we're covering all content of the FPA. Over 50% of our stewardship foresters, or roughly 50% of our stewardship foresters and new small forest landowner foresters are new to their positions. So they need to cover the basics as well as the new rule implementation that'll happen July and in January. So part of that, continuing on from there, the 2-year training program will include specific modules. So these 2 sessions are a high-level overview, and moving forward, we'll have subject-specific sessions starting this fall. And part of that offering will be for external training as well. So we'll have specific modules such as roads or streams or other topics, insects and disease, to communication. Communication skill building workshops, and that'll be a continuous process. It'll be a sustainable training program, not just kind of a hit and miss thing here and there. Part of that also is developing a task force of stewardship foresters. So we'll run a train the trainer program and train them on the new rules, old rules, and then also training techniques, and then have that same group available to execute trainings throughout the state. So coming up in June, as has been mentioned a few times before, steep slope certification training. We've got 3 offerings up and down the I-5 corridor. Currently, we have about 170 people enrolled in that. That training is required for both landowners who lay out units on steep slopes, and then stewardship foresters who are administering rules on steep slopes in Western Oregon. If there is a need, and there probably will be a need, we will continue to offer those more sessions in July. And then moving forward, we will offer that session either annually or biannually as needed to get new foresters certified. We're also working with AOL. They've revamped their basic forest practices training through their Oregon Professional Loggers program. And so we're working on aligning our presentations that we do for them to align with a new workbook that they've created. This workbook is designed for operators to be able to follow along with the training and then also use in the field as a reference. And so we've done one of those in February. We've got another one coming up in June, and then another one this fall. So we're also working with the Small Forest Landowner Office, working with Partnership for Forestry Education on training extension foresters to then go out and provide workshops mostly focused on small forest landowners, and using that same group of stewardship foresters to execute those trainings this fall also. But I'll hand it over to Jessie. She can talk more about that.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie Ebert. I'm our Small Forest Landowner Implementation Support and Tracking Manager, which is just a long-winded way of saying that I am one half of our Small Forest Landowner Office Management team. Like Jennifer mentioned, one of the things that we have coming up is our partnership with OFRI, the Oregon Forest Resources Institute. And in June, we have that Train the Trainer program, which will be working with making sure that OSU extension foresters and some of our internal foresters are trained as well, so that they're able to provide proper presentations to small forest landowners statewide. We're hoping that that will be a continued program and process as we move forward and as we get more foresters on board who want to be full-time trainers to help us out with making sure that we can really provide all that information that the small forest landowners in Oregon are looking for. We did hire 12 SFO small forest landowner foresters as well that are spread out across different districts statewide, and are currently setting up monthly meetings with that group to make sure that we're all on the same page and implementing the rules consistently on that statewide level. In June, coming up here, June 22nd through 24th, our SFO training and development specialist, his name is Aaron Mickey. He'll be presenting at the Family Forest Land Convention in Estacada coming up with Dave Bugney, who is with OSU. They will be co-presenting together and talking mostly about the new rules that are coming out in January of 2024. We're also going to continue with training our 12 new SFO foresters in specific rules that will come out in January of 2024, specifically regarding programs like SFISH, which is our Small Forest Land Investment and Stream Habitat Grant Program, as well as the FCTC, which is the Forest Conservation Tax Credit. There's a lot more in there as well, like the RCAs or road condition assessments, and talking about minimum option and what that means for small forest landowners in Oregon. We had our first training rollout in April of this year, 2023. And that was fairly successful, and we're very excited to have another training rollout for those 12 SFO foresters in November of this year as well, once we get most of our processes finalized. Our training team has done a phenomenal job on getting all of the presentations ready, already rolling out so many. Jennifer's done just an incredible job in making sure that we're all prepared as these new rules are about to be rolled out. Internally and externally, like Jennifer mentioned, we will be working on that 2-year cycle and making sure that we have all of the trainings that both small forest landowners and large forest landowners and industrial folks will be able to partake in, to make sure that everybody's on the same page moving forward. In regards to who people can go to and who they can talk to if they have questions, us here at the Small Forest Landowner Office, we really want to be a resource for everyone. And we also want to make sure that local boots on the ground are involved as well, so that it's not just Salem representation. And we want to make sure that we have that Salem field connection. And so we do have a Small Forest Landowner Office email address that people can send their questions to, and it's just simply smallforestlandowneroffice@odf.oregon.gov that they can go ahead and shoot their questions over to, and we can have some of our specialists who are working on the new rules respond to. They will also be forwarding those emails to the local stewardship forester or SFO forester or district forester in that area to make sure that everyone's on the same page in regards to a response as well, and that if we need that local support, we have that, because I think that's incredibly important. Another thing that we've been working on is we've been working with public affairs to make sure that all of this training is consistent in our messaging, so that we're on brand, on mission with everything that we have moving forward. That is all that I currently have. If there are any questions, we'd love to be able to answer any that you all might have. Stellar. Thank you so much.
All right, appreciate it. Although I'm probably as involved as most anybody in the small woodland owner world, and I've heard very little from this SFO office. So I guess the word is going out, but it's missing me.
But as we talked about hiring, I don't know if Jesse and Jennifer were on, since they're heading up the training down south today. The SFO office being new is also one of the parts that we've been building out, and I guess the hiring there and getting the communications up and running is part of the. It's been more of a delay than we want to see, and maybe this helps kind of, as our staff have been riding the bicycle and trying to build it at the same time. Luckily, we haven't stuck the forks in the ground yet, and we're getting the front wheel on so we can make sure that all the communication points are hit. We're just rolling forward with all the touch points that need to happen.
Funding for these new positions, how is that? Like, Phil goes in, we've got all these new positions, especially those SFOs. What is the fund? Is it continuous funding every year that you're going to get that money, or what is it?
So there's the question for, did everybody hear the question on the other side of the screen? Just kind of restate. The question is, what about funding for these positions? We have a lot of training positions. We have a lot of other positions, technical specialists in Salem. We also have about 18 new foresters that we added to the mix out in the field, and some management capacity out in the field. So what does the funding look like long-term? And the private forest court bills gave the department 58 or 59 positions, and 7 of those were limited duration. So that funding is expected to go away. Some of those positions on June 30th, 2023. Some of those positions, there will be funding available to help get the Ferns project done. So that'll continue on, and also some of the data that with GIS positions that are involved in make sure that the data layers are right in Ferns. So those will continue on. And then the rest of the positions, the other 51 positions, are included in our what's called current service level. When we put forward our budget from biennium to biennium, every 2 years, the legislature is looking at it and saying, is the department, whatever department it is, are they delivering on what we expect them to deliver on? And we put in the continuing service level, and typically, assuming the economy is staying on track, then that continuing service level keeps all those positions in place.
So it's the same funding that over the years forest practices have had. So we lose positions, we gain, we have to, so it isn't like we've got this big project now and you've got a better support system for your funding. Okay. So we would expect that the continued service level with those 51 positions would continue from biennium to biennium, unless there's a downturn in the economy and they're asking everybody to go through a budget cut exercise like we saw in 2009. It's been a long time like this.
Sure.
Service forestry program, remember that, kind of like this. So, but hey, at least you got it now when it's starting and people could get out there and help.
And one other thing that I add on to that is we're also, as we're building this out, needing to keep track of what are folks doing, so we can take the credit as an agency for the good work that the foresters are doing, the good work that's being done in the field by the regulated community. And that's part of the Ferns build up, part of some of the other things that we'll see in the next few years. And it's also part of the underpinnings for the habitat conservation plan to show the services that, yes, the department is doing what it's supposed to be doing. There's good compliance rates, et cetera. So if that helps.
No, it does.
I had a quick, more prosaic question going back to the presentation. Right now, today, can small forest owners already call the small forest owner office with questions or email them? Is that already working?
Yeah, that email address is already up and running. If you're looking to talk to someone on the phone, I'd highly recommend reaching out to your local stewardship forester. But we have that email address set up and it is ready to rock and roll whenever.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay. Well, we thank you both and look forward to the training programs that are upcoming, especially from the small forest owner standpoint, as well as the industrial. I know you've been engaged with OFIC and AOL and others, so appreciate the hard work and the training that's going to be required in order to bring everyone up to speed. That's going to be hard to do in the family forest land world, because many of them don't engage. Their first engagement will be when they file a notification. So anyway, we'll carry on. Next up, we're going to have a discussion. Is Kate up there? Is she on board? You see her name?
Kate Thompson.
She's in the room.
I have a hospitality suite, and if whoever is in charge of screen sharing and Zoom would be so kind as to give me access, I would appreciate it.
You need the screen share?
Yes, please. You should be co-host now. Okay, we've got it.
Go ahead.
All righty, here we go. One moment. Hey, good morning, Chair Barnes, Chair Chose, members of the committee. My name is Kate Thompson, and I'm here to talk about the status of post-disturbance harvest rulemaking. In January, the board directed us to proceed with post-disturbance harvest rulemaking, and there are actually a few pieces that we have to do prior to that to make sure that we are in keeping with all of the statutory requirements for rulemaking. Unlike the last process, which was kind of set outside the typical way that we go about making rules, this one we're going back to, I don't know if I call it the old way, but the more typical way in which we follow the statutes that have been on the books for quite a while. So we've got this big long list of things here that we have to do first. And I'm going to walk through each of these steps. We are right smack in the middle of it right now and making some progress, and I'll be discussing that and as part of my presentation. So as part of the Private Forest Accord in Senate Bill 1501, the department was directed to complete post-disturbance harvest rulemaking by November 30th, 2025. We were given guidance about the research that we needed to do to inform the board about what we may or may not need to do with respect to this rulemaking, and returned the board, I would say, to the process described in Oregon Revised Statute ORS 527.714, which provides specific criteria for when the board can direct the department to make rules. One thing that's different from future rulemakings is that this process is exempted from the adaptive management process, so the ANSI IRST process going forward, because of the tight timeline that we have to complete this work. So in January 2023, we went to the board and requested that they direct us to initiate rulemaking, which they did. At which point the department began a research project to develop a report to the board, because the board has to do what we call a 714 analysis. So they need to determine whether current rule is causing or has the potential to cause degradation to certain natural resources. So at that time, we assembled a team, developed a research plan, and began a literature review in order to gather that information that's going to go into a report to the board. So in addition to ORS 527.714, which requires that rules provide for the overall maintenance of air quality, water resources, including but not limited to sources of domestic drinking water, soil productivity, and fish and wildlife, we had certain guidelines in the Private Forest Accord report that we also are following as far as their guidance towards this literature review. And then at the end of, and I'll go into that in more depth in just a moment, but in the goal of this is to look at the best possible science, look at what's out there, make sure that we are being thorough, and to provide recommendations based on the findings of our review. So in addition to the 714 requirements, the PFA report recommended that we investigate natural regeneration, post-disturbance ecology, worker safety, which is not under the mandate of ODF, and we will recommend to the board that they take that to OSHA to take a look at, but that we are looking to make sure that current rule is also in keeping with the goal of protecting aquatic resources, having those cool, clean, clear, connected streams in order to tie this in with the protection of the covered species under the Habitat Conservation Plan. As part of this review, we have an internal review, which is, we're doing what's called a rapid review, a systematic review, which is a very thorough look at the literature, take several years. And what we've done is we've scaled that down so that it's still with the goal of maintaining the transparency of that kind of review and reducing, you know, the bias in searches and some of the excellent things that that type of review provides, so that it's very clear about what we have and have, you know, what we have done and how we've designed the study, and all that's laid right out there. We've also got some considerable public outreach that we're trying to do. We have reached out to tribal governments and asked for their input. We are currently in the process of reaching out to subject matter experts. We've reached out to 50 academic researchers who study salvage logging and impacts on riparian areas and aquatic resources. And from June 2nd, I believe the press release is going out today, as a matter of fact, but from June 2nd to June 22nd, we will be requesting public input on this topic as well, as far as impacts of post-disturbance harvest. And a disturbance, by the way, is not just fire. We're looking at insect outbreaks, we're looking at disease, catastrophic major weather events, natural disasters, so earthquakes, that sort of thing, if on the unlikely chance Mount Hood erupts, anything along those lines. So we're reaching out to the public and looking for input as well, requesting peer-reviewed journal articles on these topics from June 2nd to 22nd. We would encourage you, if this is the sort of literature you collect, we would love to hear from you. The email address to send that information is odf. Oh, I'm going to forget the email address now. It is, what is it? It is odf.frdrules@odf.oregon.gov. My apologies. So this public input process is going to be kind of the last step, making sure that we are leaving no stone unturned and being as thorough as we can. This process is going to take place over the course of the rest of this year, and that's through gathering the information, synthesizing the information, writing it up for the board, providing all the appendices detailing how we did our work, what kind of information we received from various interest groups, and the people that we reached out to directly. At which point, once this is completed, the goal is to have this to the board for the March 2024 meeting. And a lot of this is because we're trying to leave room for rulemaking, which has to be completed November 30, 2025. So when the board reviews our report, what they're looking for is they're asking a couple of questions. The first is there evidence that degradation of resources is likely under current rule? And does current rule reflect the goals of the PFA report? There is one rule in particular that is called out in Division 643, and that is Division 629, Division 643, 0300, and that's sub 3 there, which is for post-disturbance in activity in riparian areas. And so the question becomes, do current rules provide adequate basal area retention? There's some tables in there that we need to take a look at. Stream shade, woody debris, and bank stability, and tying into the PFA report to avoid, minimize, and mitigate effects on aquatic habitat. So that would be the goals of the PFA report there. So we have a lot of moving parts and a lot of pieces to look at. The board will take all the information we give them, do that 714 analysis, where they're looking at air quality, they're looking at water quality, they're looking at soil productivity, and they're looking at impacts on fish and wildlife. And they will use those criteria to make their findings. So what are the next steps? Well, once we have this report complete to the board, what we do next will depend on what the board directs us to do. If there is a finding of degradation to these resources, the rulemaking will go forward. And if there is no finding of degradation, then the rulemaking will not go forward. But that is dependent on the board and what they determine based on the information we provide them, as well as any other information they wish to gather during this process. So where do the regional forest practices committees fit in with this? We would love it if you have available peer-reviewed journal articles on this topic to send them to us. We're not concerned about duplicates. If we already have it and you send it to us, that just confirms that we are on the right track. So that input is helpful to us whichever way it goes. And if you have found things that we do not have, we'd be very grateful to have them. But if the board does direct us to continue with rulemaking at the end of this initial process here, it will be the RFPC to review the draft rules. And just as a reminder, there's a statutory deadline to complete rulemaking, and that is November 30th, 2025. So this is a very aggressive timeline. We're trying to do as much as we can in as short a period of time as we have available to us. So are there any questions?
So are the reviews that have been made to this point, are those available?
We are in the process right now of investigating and reviewing the literature. We haven't written anything up or synthesized information. What we're trying to do right now is collect all that information, see what's out there, make sure that it meets certain criteria. So we want to make sure basically that it's on topic. We want to make sure that the areas of study are ecologically similar to Oregon, because if we only focused on Oregon, there wouldn't be a whole lot out there. But we also want to make sure that these outreach periods that we have set forth, that we're able to review those contributions as well. The final report will be available to the board in March of 2023. So when that is complete, that will be available to the public as part of the board packet.
Will the email address be in the minutes? I didn't catch it when I was trying to write it down.
I can put that in chat if that would be helpful.
Any other questions or comments as this process moves forward? Hearing none. And any from your committee?
None that I know of, Mike. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll follow this process, and as appropriate, the committees will be involved at the time we're asked to do so. But if you want to review that information when it goes to the board, which is in March of 23, take a look at it. All right, moving forward. Oh, hey, we're almost to the point of departure. I don't know how many submissions there's been for Operator of the Year. I know it's been out there and sent out to us. So Kirk, if you could review what's been put forward to this point and encourage us to be proactive in securing good nominees for Operator of the Year.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. My name is Kirk Oslin, and just be giving you an update here where we're at with the Operator of the Year process and timelines coming up. Greg Wagenglass is still the coordinator for the Operator of the Year information. I'm just stepping in for him this morning. So I know it's been a long day or a long morning for you folks on the phone and virtually, so I'll keep this brief. So the deadlines for submissions for this year is the middle of next month. So that's coming up here pretty soon. We have taken the opportunity at the trainings we've been putting on this spring to remind the stewardship foresters of the importance of recognizing outstanding operators and their good work out there. And so hopefully we're going to be getting some more submissions. Like you mentioned, right now we don't have that many. Basically, we've got one for each area that's been submitted, but talking to people at these trainings, it sounds like there's going to be potentially 4 or 5 more coming in. So we really want to take this opportunity with this training to keep the stewardship foresters proactive with their submissions. So the tour dates coming up, the EOA, and this is for the fall tour, the Operator of the Year tour. The EOA group is going to roll out October 3rd through October 4th. Southwest is October 10th through the 11th, and Northwest is from October 24th through October 25th. So I hope none of you folks are hunters and you'll be able to be available to go on those tours with us. Like you mentioned, the meeting invites have all been set out by Greg to you folks for those tour dates, and along with other relevant information for you. That's what I have for you. Are there any questions?
So I might remind us all that it's not only the stewardship foresters that can make nominations. It's anyone here on the committee or that can also do that, or encourage a potential nominee to allow his name, their company name, to be put forward. So it's something for all of us, not just the stewardship foresters.
That is correct. Yep.
And I've looked at this in previous years, and it's the operators really feel good about being nominated and being selected, not only for Operator of the Year, but for the other awards that are available to them as well. And it's good PR. These people are doing excellent work on the ground, and we need to show that. So
right.
If we have nominated, the better.
Right. And that's one of the talking points I use, is that ODF, we want to recognize outstanding operators out there because it promotes our industry, it supports the timber industry. And so often in this day and age, we hear a lot of negative things about logging on the landscape. And this is a way to demonstrate that, operators on private lands are doing, outstanding work for the most part. And I fully agree with what you said. We definitely want to promote good work out there in the ground.
Okay, well, we look forward to a good tour for all the committees coming up in the fall. And glad to hear that other stewardship foresters are at least considering nominees from their various areas. So hopefully that'll come forward, and we'll have a good tour. We've had some really good ones in the past. I've been on a lot of them. They're all excellent. We learn more from them than we do any other way about the good things they're doing. All right, anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Dana?
Oh, the only thing I'd say is thanks to Nick and all the presenters today for presenting their material. Very much appreciated.
Oh, there is a question. Oh, Chris, I see your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah. I just want to return to some of our previous conversation and go on record and say, as far as trees on the ground and not yarded on January 1st of 24, that's going to be in future buffer areas. I really think that needs to be looked at a little more. There needs to be a little bit of flexibility there. And I mean, the answer to the question on planting through down timber is evidence that maybe it needs to be looked at a little closer. There's unexpected circumstances that come up, whether it's weather, can't predict that, equipment breakdowns, there's a whole host of other things. And so, just want to put that out there. And a clean break on January 1st may sound really nice, but it's really not reality. So.
I think we've heard that message. Hopefully,
I just wanted to reiterate it.
Thank you, and it's been heard. We'll see what ODF does with this one, as much as they can, if anything. All right. Any other comments? Hey, we're actually ahead of schedule, so you won't miss your lunch hour. This is good. Thanks all for being present. It's good to see, at least in the Zoom format, most of the committee members present. we have a lot of work to do. Don't be bashful about reaching out and saying, I want to be involved in this, and see what the department says to you. I'm pretty sure they're always open and willing to hear from those that are practitioners and those that take care of the land. So stay involved. All right.
Well, again, Mike, thank you for your leadership.
Yeah. Hey, John, how are you doing out there?
Oh, quite well. Cleaning up the lowdown. Again,
you have time now. You can go on a long hike.
Yeah, I can try another hike, but I have other priorities. I've got to get those woods in shape. So, but anyway, I really appreciate your leadership, continued leadership in this, Mike. It really helps.
All right, everybody.
And ditto to that.
See you in a future meeting. We're out.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.